Good afternoon. I am Nicola Cratton, Chair of the CPD Committee for the Insurance Institute of Manchester. Please note that this session is being recorded and it is our intention to share the recording on the IIM website shortly after. With the holiday coming up this weekend, it may be later on next week when it's available for viewing. So welcome to today's session. It's another bite-sized session. These were created to introduce or refresh knowledge and awareness of specific areas of the insurance industry. We are delighted to have Craig Fookes, Subsidence Director at Innovation Group, delivering today's session, which is focused on subsidence and the impact that the changing climate is having on this peril. Given the recent spell of prolonged dry weather and a rise in instructions, this session could not be more timely. And so, yes, delighted to have Craig with us, and I will now pass over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Nicola. Before I start, I'll run the presentation. I'll get in trouble if I don't say about CPD. So the first bit is about the learning objectives. So I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Hopefully you can see that, everyone.
Yes, we can. Thanks, Craig.
Brilliant. Okay, right. So yes, to comply with our CPD, just want to reference about the learning objectives today. So by the end of the session, you'll have an understanding of what subsidence is, impact of climate change on subsidence, and technology and AI in subsidence claims handling. So thank you, first of all, for joining. I appreciate that not everyone wants to hear about subsidence during their lunch break, and probably not the most exciting to some people, but Nicola's spot on. It has been a very dry and relatively warm year, so there's a lot more attention to subsidence this year, and we'll discuss what the numbers are looking like as we go through the presentation. But thank you anyway for joining. In terms of the agenda, no surprise, it aligns with the CPD, but I also want to give a bit of an overview to the background to the peril, a bit of history. Now I see some of the names on that's joined us today that will be more than familiar with the background and what is subsidence, but I recognise there's perhaps some other people that are new to subsidence and that peril, so I want to give a bit of an overview and oversight to it. So without further ado, a brief history. So it all started in 71. Before that, people used to just have regular fractures and damage to their house, and they used to repair it themselves. They had no recourse to insurance or anything like that. It was very much a low-key aspect. It was actually mortgage lenders and banks that were putting pressure on insurers to provide cover for subsidence. Obviously, there's a big investment into property from mortgage lenders, etc., and they wanted that investment to be protected. So they were increasing the pressure on insurers to extend that policy to include subsidence. First few years, it was fine. There wasn't many claims. People carried on as they were, used to be able to fix it themselves every year. It was 76 that caused the problem. Obviously, the drought of 76, where there were so many more claims. The common thing at the outset was to underpin everything. Didn't even get engineers or adjusters involved, went straight to a contractor who used to then put a quote together for underpinning and went through the insurance policy. For those who aren't familiar with underpinning, most properties have concrete foundations. Some of the older properties have brick and even timber, but the main is concrete. And underpinning means that it's basically taking that foundation to a deeper depth than it is currently, or it was currently. Unfortunately, a lot of the underpinning 1970s failed in the 80s and 90s because the science, the knowledge about trees and the impact of climate wasn't as fully aware in the 70s. So the underpinning wasn't taken to the depth that was really going to provide long-term stability. And therefore, we've had to deal with them in the 80s and 90s, etc., and either address mitigation, which is tree removal usually, or done extra underpinning, which we'll come on to about the mitigation aspect. In the 90s was probably a major change within the industry. and this was where historically it started with just contractors going out and quoting for underpinning, moved to more the use of external engineering companies. So general adjusters would employ an external engineer to give advice on subsidence and what needs to be done. Invariably, that resulted in underpinning still, because the external engineer wanted obviously to get it resolved without it coming back with any problems, etc. So there was a very much a heavy bias towards underpinning. In the 1990s, it was agreed that really, why have the adjuster and the engineer? Why don't we combine that role and have an internal adjuster that's obviously got expertise in engineering and surveying? So a lot of my colleagues, actually, and myself included, in the 1990s were enticed into the adjusting world, and once you're in, you can't get out. That's what it seems like, anyway. And yeah, so many massive recruitment drive in the 1990s to take surveyors and engineers on, and then provide the training afterwards for the insurance aspects. In the 90s as well, another aspect that sort of come to prevalence was the knowledge and the understanding that we didn't have to underpin everything, that we could actually look at doing mitigation, which invariably involves tree works. If it's a drain problem, fixing the drains. So moving away from the underpinning option all the time. And that has continued, and still is continuing now. We'll discuss it later. There is a bit more of a reluctance to remove trees because the Environmental Act, and also the pressure to retain vegetation, but that is still the general principle: to find the cause, remove the cause, basically. In terms of more modern days, we'll look at some stats about ABI subsidence notifications. What I would say, over the last 10 years, there seems to be a lot more frequency of hot, dry summers, and that's obviously increases the risk of subsidence losses. We've also seen in the last few years some really heavy wet weather in the winter period, increasing the number of landslips as well. So it's definitely changed over the last 10 years. I'm not a scientist or a climate expert, but I've definitely seen a variance in terms of the makeup of the claims we receive, etc. And then I suppose what I want to discuss later is about AI, and is that going to be the next big change? You know, we said 1990s, the project managed subsidence was a sort of a major event within the subsidence world. Are we now talking about AI being the next massive step forward, which we'll come on to later? So just want to show you some numbers. So these are provided by the ABI. These are notifications per year, going back to 2000. Now, first of all, you'll probably see the trend line, the dotted green line. You can see there's been a general massive notable downward trend, and this is varied reasons. We've obviously dealt with a lot of claims already. New properties have much deeper foundations, so they're not as at risk. People are more alive and aware of the impacts and risks of trees near to properties. So there is a general decline. The bar charts in red are classed as surge years. Believe it or not, there's no standard definition within the market about what a surge constitutes, or how a subsidence surge would be initiated or is rated. What we generally do, we have a look at the baseline, so the first 6 months of a year, and then we see how much uplift is noted during August, September, October. In 2018, 2022, we were seeing 5-fold up to 7-fold uplift over the baseline. So basically in August, we were seeing 7 times as many claims as we would in January or February, which is a massive uptick. So even though these red bar charts don't look significant, it's the short time period that there's additional work comes over. It's from July till October, basically. So the other thing to notice is obviously that between 2017 and 2018, you can see the actual claims doubled, but as I say, it was predominantly over a 3 or 4 month period. So you're getting a whole year's work over a 3 or 4 month period. And the other thing relating to the climate change, you can see there was after 2006, there was no real events, but suddenly we've had 2018, 2022. and 2025, we'll see. We'll see. It's an interesting one, which we'll discuss later on. I think another factor that's really important is the claim costs for subsidence. So I've compared, this is from the ABI as well, I've compared subsidence against escape of water. You can see that, because I understand escape of water is the probably most common peril, and you can see that has increased. And now obviously there's been Brexit, there's been increased rates. I think there's an element of, we've moved to an open plan properties. So historically, there would be a number of rooms in the ground floor. So if one area got damaged, you'd only repair one area. Now we seem to be repairing and decorating larger areas. But you can see in subsidence, the cost has gone up much more significantly than escape of water. So why is that? A few factors really. One is we've had 2 surges during that period. So surges result in more widespread damage, meaning more extensive repairs are needed. But the other factors for me is that because of the Environmental Act, because of the appetite to retain trees, we're now spending more money or having to underpin more properties. I was speaking to a client recently. They historically said that it was always about 4% of their book that was underpinned. They're now saying it's running at 8%. So that has doubled up. Still smaller numbers. Most of the ones aren't being underpinned, but it's obviously a notable factor. And the other thing, to mention is that even when we don't underpin, if the tree has only been reduced rather than removed, the Ombudsman has said we have to offer a long and lasting repair. Now, that means that we can't do a cosmetic repair that perhaps we would have done historically. We have to do more of a structural repair, maybe put some bars in the cracks, etc., to strengthen the structure. That all comes with a cost. And hence you can see that the cost has gone up notably for subsidence versus another extensive peril. And hence why there's so much focus on subsidence, because not only has it more commonly surge at times, but also the cost as well. So what is subsidence? As I say, there's a number of people on this call that are fully familiar with what subsidence is, but I think it'd be good to cover it anyway. I'm hopefully nobody is on the call from the ABI, because I'm not particularly happy or comfortable with the recommendation or the statement they've put on their website about what subsidence is, because if you read the first paragraph, first aspect, it says subsidence is when the ground beneath a building sinks, pulling the property's foundations down with it. That almost intimates it's like a glue, which is not the case at all. The ground doesn't move and then pull the foundation. The ground moves separate to the foundation. The other thing that it does worry me, that it actually doesn't even use the correct terminology. It doesn't use subsidence on here. So I don't particularly like that explanation that they use. I prefer the one that is used by the RICS. So this correctly says subsidence is a downward movement of foundations of the building due to changes in supporting strata, different from settlement. That's very important, this definition between settlement and subsidence, and I think I want to just explain it to you. I read an article many years ago about visualization, that when you're trying to explain something, especially when it's slightly more technical, try to let the audience visualize it. And when you visualize it, try to give a summary of where something that's positive for the audience, etc. So you'll probably find today that I'll do a lot of reference to the beach, holiday, childhood memories, etc. So I'm going to start straight away. So to explain settlement, imagine if you was a beach and you had a normal sized bucket and spade for the beach. You build a sandcastle. Lovely sandcastle, very, very robust, no problems with it at all. And then suddenly, by the side of it, you see a large rock. You put that large rock on that sandcastle, and what happens? That sandcastle moves downwardly. It gets compressed because of the weight. Now, eventually that will stop. It'll reach that equilibrium where it doesn't keep continually moving downwards. Now, that initial movement downwards is settlement. So that movement down is due to load imposed. So basically, it's nothing to do with the sand at all. It's to do with the load that was put on it. Now, that is obviously the same with a property. You build a property on soil, except rock, and it initially settles whilst that load is put onto the soil. That isn't covered by the policy, and that most policies exclude settlement, usually in the first couple of years of the life of the building, but that is excluded. Completely different to subsidence, and probably easier if I show you the images. So the most common cause of subsidence is clay shrinkage subsidence. So it's the shrinkage of the clay. And that's most commonly caused by tree roots taking moisture from the soil. And it equates to probably 60–70% of our valid claims. So a high proportion of the claims are due to clay shrinkage subsidence. So I'm going to use my visualization tactic again and reference when I was young and I used to go with friends and we had water fights. We were sometimes allowed to use balloons. And as a mischievous little boy, I used to try to get some dry soil and crush it up and put it in the balloon before I put the water in. The reason being, because if I managed to hit somebody in the head, it would stick up, all the mud would stick to their hair. But anyway, the reason I say that is because I got very little mud or soil within the water balloon. But if you can imagine a lump of clay is probably about 75% of that water balloon is soil, and 25%, a quarter of it is water. So 3/4 is soil, a quarter is water. Now that water balloon is all very plump, full volume, significant. If you suddenly emptied the water, left the soil in, suddenly that volume drops or shrinks notably. So the actual size of that water balloon is so much smaller. Exactly the same principle with clay. So the foundations are sitting on the clay with water, say a quarter of it. Take the water out, the foundations therefore drop because the clay has dropped. Ironically, you can actually put that water back in, and that's what happens over the winter period or when the trees become dormant. The clay rehydrates, and there once again it expands to its full size again. So that's where we get the clay shrinkage subsidence. So we get cracks opening in the summer or the autumn, and then closing again in the winter or the next spring, providing the winters has sufficient rainfall. Drains. Now, the first thing to mention here is you'll see the nature of the cracking is exactly the same. You've got a tapered fracture here, but the cause is different. So one is trees, one is drains. So that's why it's so important to understand the type of soil, the timing of damage, and what the site conditions are. Is there a lot of trees around? Is there drains, etc.? And if it's still not clear, that's when you might have to do some investigations below ground, test the soil, take the drains, etc. What I would say, even though it says on here that the leakage from drains can cause bearing capacity in clay soils, that is very few and far between. By far, the most common problem with leaking drains is on sands and gravels. So if we go back to our sandcastle again, we've put the pebble on and we've had initial settlement, but then it's fine. It's not going to move any further. But what happens when that tide comes in? So if the water comes in and it hits a bit of that sandcastle, it washes it away, doesn't it? Exactly the same principle with drains. If you get some water into the sand or the gravels, it washes the fine particles away. And that's what happens. The foundations then drop because that sand has been washed away. Unlike clay, it cannot recover. Unfortunately, once those fines have been washed away, it cannot recover. Generally, when you remove the water source, it doesn't move any further, which is good news, but it doesn't recover like the clay soil. So what we generally know is that if it's clay, it's probably going to be a tree issue. If it's sands, gravels, granular material, it's going to be a drain issue. And the other thing just to mention is that tree roots don't generally have, well, they don't have any impact on sand and gravel. If you can imagine another visualization for you, a glass full of marbles, the marbles touch each other. So there's no way that if you took the water out, the marbles will still be still touching each other. So they won't be able to shrink or reduce. Whereas in clay is surrounded by platelets are surrounded by water. So if you remove that water, it shrinks. It's completely different to a setup with sand, basically. Now, the final one is removal of vegetation, which is known as heave. Now, this is an aspect that a lot of people are concerned about, say, oh, we can't remove our tree because it's going to cause heave. In reality, I think there's probably in our portfolio, probably 0.5% of our book is heave. Nearly all of it is subsidence or landslip, or predominantly subsidence with a couple percent landslip. So heave is a very, very unusual scenario. You do get some situations, especially in the 90s, that they didn't fully understand the ramifications of removing sort of woodland area. When the clay is really dry and desiccated, and then you remove the woodland area and it rehydrates, and that causes heave. Now you'll see the difference there on the sketch. So on the drains and the trees one, you can see that the fracture is wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, whereas heave is the opposite way round. It's wider at the bottom and narrows as it goes up. That's because the ground is lifting, and that causes a different form of cracking. Heave is very difficult to resolve with trees and drains. I always used to say, this house has been here 50 years. It's suddenly moved. What is the cause? Why is it suddenly moved? We need to understand what has made it move, and then address the cause. And that would be either tree removal, tree reduction, fix the drains. With heave, the problem's already been created. You remove the tree. So you're either going to have to ride out the heave. Is that heave movement going to take 10, 15, 20 years? Or alternatively, you have to underpin the property as well. So they are complicated claims because you have to try and ascertain how long that heave may take place. But as I say, fortunately, small volume. So, impacts of climate change. So here's some data on subsidence surge years, which aligns with the first graph on the left-hand side. So 2003, 2006, 18, 2022. Are we talking about 2025? What I would say is early July, the volumes we were receiving and observing were ahead of 2018 and 2022. So we actually thought this year could be even bigger than those. But then we had a lot of rain at the end of July. So these graphs on the left-hand side, I'll see if I can get the pointer up. Sometimes a bit temperamental. No, sorry, bear with me, so there you go. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. That is July 2022. This is a government water situation report, and you can see that it's classed as exceptionally low. And even for the last 3 months in July 2022, the rainfall was exceptionally low. Now we, in this July, even though it didn't necessarily feel like it, had normal rainfall in most of the UK, especially areas where we had clay. This would be this area, and that resulted in the actual overall last 3 months becoming notably low, but before that it was exceptionally low. So the impact of July has really influenced the volumes. So we, as I say, the first 2-3 weeks of July, we were seeing volumes higher and rising quicker than 2018, 2022. Since we had the end of the July, the thunderstorms, the extensive rain, it's leveled off significantly. Now this week, once again, we are starting to see a notable increase, and the volumes are starting to escalate once again. But I believe next week we're predicted a further heavy or further extensive rain, so that could curtail it once again. So it just demonstrates how how much we're impacted by the rainfall and conditions, and especially during key months, July, August, etc. That can really influence our volumes. So it could still be classed as a surge year, but it doesn't look that way at the moment. But I think we're still going to be fairly busy. The other thing I just wanted to cover on here is on the right-hand side. So this is a report that was produced by the government-funded Climate Committee. which was actually produced in 2021, so before the 2022 surge in the summer, the high summer. But interesting enough, they said that this is by the mid-century. They said by the mid-century they expect every other summer to be like a 2018. So the chances going forward of further and more extensive subsidence surges is increased notably by the middle of the century. The other interesting fact about it, though, they also think by the middle of the century we're going to have wetter winters than we have now, and more importantly, they think it's going to be a heavier rainfall, 10% increase. So, are we into the realms of the increased landslip risks and solution features and problems in the winter, and then we're faced with surges during the summer? So it's quite feasible based on this that climate change is going to make our market even more volatile than it is now. As I say, that we in the last few years we've seen a lot of years where we've seen surges or potential surges more so than what was historically. So yes, something to bear in mind going forward. So technology. I just want to cover this because it's moved on significantly since I started in the market. I think also the other factor to reference is obviously Uber and Amazon. That has probably upped the ante and expectations by customers. Obviously, not only timescales, but the real-time tracking of aspects. Now, we acknowledge that, and we are responding as a market and industry to that. But I think it is difficult sometimes, and we have to probably be better at managing expectations in terms of how long sometimes subsidence claims do take and will take. So even if we had a claim in today, and we do effective triage, and we know that it's definitely the customer tree, and it's clay shrinkage subsidence, definitely valid. So we do something random, and we go out there and we say, right, we're going to accept the claim. We're going to actually take a chainsaw with us as well. We're going to chop you down your tree, and then we're actually going to repair the damage. Well, that would be futile if there's bad damage. The reason being, remember at the outset, I said that the clay shrinks, but then it rehydrates over the winter, or where the tree removed. So even if we repaired something today, if we have ground rehydration, all that repair work will be spoiled. It will come back, it will damage, because then cracks will close. So even if we had 50 people dealing with a claim, there's certain claims that we cannot remove any earlier, because you have to wait for nature to take its or work its magic, i.e. rehydrate the ground. So those are the aspects that we are faced with and challenges we do have in subsidence. But as I say, I think as a market, I think industry, we've improved our way we do manage expectations, but I still think we could probably take it to the next level, because with subsidence claims, especially tree related ones, there's so many unknowns and so many things that may vary, because the tree owner may be reluctant, there might be protests involved for removal of the tree, and it's just sort of being alive to them and making the customer aware that these are the potential ramifications, etc., and things like that. The other thing that I've noticed over the last few years and since starting, particularly when I started in the industry, it was very much pick up the phone or maybe even write a letter. Now there is so much variance in terms of how people want to be communicated with, how they want to receive the information. We have to capture that and make sure we're comfortable that the way we are updating customers is how they want it to be done. We get some that say we just want automated updates. We get some people that say, don't contact me, we'll have a look at the portal and see where we are. And then there's others which want to discuss it. And they're the ones that we obviously need to make sure that human touch continues. For me personally, I like the human touch, because there's always a risk that if somebody looks at our system or gets an automated one, they'll prompt questions and they can't be answered then. Whereas if you're speaking to someone, you can invariably answer those questions. But it is just an aspect to bear in mind now that we are facing so many variances in terms of how people like to receive information, and we need to accommodate that. I think the other thing that I've noticed over the last few years is how much more visibility we have got about understanding the portfolio, what work we've got. When I started, I had a big cabinet behind me with all my files. Now, if you'd have said to me, pointed to one, I would have known where that claim was and what stage it was, and probably even roughly what sort of cost it would have been. But if you'd asked me, well, overall, what's your portfolio? How much are in repair? How much are in investigation? I couldn't have told you. I didn't have any Excels or spreadsheets or BI reports to say where my portfolio was. I didn't know what I was going to be giving the contractors next month, etc., because I didn't know what stage they were at. Whereas now we have much better visibility and understanding where our portfolios are, where the pinch points are, where the work's going to be flowing through to contractors, and also invaluable information for our clients as well, because they need to know where everything is. They need to know average claim spend for certain claim types, etc., durations, all and also tracking that we are hopefully improving as an industry as well. So it's much more beneficial now to have this information, but obviously there's nowhere to hide, not like the historic, it's in the file that nobody knew about it. So we have to be very we have to be on game really to make sure, because this detail and information is visible to all. I think another aspect that's perhaps become more critical in the last couple of years is exception reporting. So we know that claim duration is so important when it comes to the customer service and customer journey. We have done some analysis to show that the longer the claim goes on, the more likely it's going to have a complaint or dissatisfied customer on. So the key is to obviously make sure we curtail those durations, but in the correct manner. We don't obviously want to conclude a claim early and then it comes back. We need to make sure we're comfortable it can be concluded. But I think the exception reporting now is very beneficial in terms of we know what the average timescale is for a certain claim to try and get a tree out, say a local authority tree, how long it usually takes on average to take that tree out. So we now need to know, is this individual claim gone over that time period? If so, let's have a look at it. Why has it gone over that? What else can we do? Does the customer know that it's gone over that period? What other solutions could there possibly be? Those are the things we need to know and aware of. And we've now got MI and data that helps us find those claims rather than they're sitting in the cabinet. I didn't know about that one. I didn't know it had gone, been sitting there for 4 years sort of thing. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but to purposes today, don't worry. I never used to have claims 4 years old. The other thing, now, obviously, I'm referring what we've got, and I know there's other different reports within the industry. It's identifying the ones that perhaps aren't going according to plan, or the customer's not quite as happy as what we would want. And these are the ones where they maybe sent in the email, and it's a phrase in the email that's not particularly positive, and they come up as a code red. So allowing the manager to look at those daily and thinking, right, that email's something's not right here. We need to jump on it. We need to get on the phone. We need to take some action. So they're really useful now, because we never had that sort of luxury many years ago. And another aspect is a complaint predictor as well. So another area perhaps that I've welcomed in the last couple of years is identifying those claims that are going off track. So there might be certain sort of aspects to certain claims that always going to be more prone to complaints. So a reoccurrence, the damage came back. We have an external party involved representing the customer that is obviously pushing it hard, etc. So these are the sort of things that we factor in to give us ones that maybe are more prone to having a complaint on, and or maybe we've unfortunately we haven't responded to certain emails in a certain time, and they come top of the list. So our managers, our teams can see, well, I need to really jump on this one today to prevent that complaint. So it's getting ahead of the game, really. So this is really beneficial to have this sort of level of information. Moving on to AI. I'm a bit ahead of time, unfortunately. Try and draw this one out a bit more. I don't know if anyone's read the UK Customer Satisfaction Index or has commonly reviewed it and read it, but it was an interesting article in January this year, and the exec summary was pretty much referencing that AI is excellent, but be careful just to rely on that alone. You know, it's really good. It's really it's more powerful when you use it with a human touch, when you intervene as well with that AI, and that can utilize it as well. So that's definitely an aspect that we've embraced and believe in, and I think that's the industry's view as well, generally. So there is been use of AI. As I say, I'm giving now an industry one overview and where we are with AI. So I think one of the most beneficial uses of AI is triage and routing. So historically, when I say AI, I'm talking about machine decision making away from the humans, and also machine learning. So historically, for triage and routing, we used to get a new notification in, potential subsidence, and you would have somebody looking at it and reviewing it and thinking, right, yeah, I think somebody needs to do this physically rather than doing it digitally, or I think that's probably a likely declinature rather than a valid claim, so we can send this person out. And it was always a manual intervention and time-consuming aspect, and we weren't always that accurate. We can now do that by AI. It can analyze fractures. It can talk about the timing, look at the type of the soil in that area, the history. Has there been a lot of valid claims there previously or declinatures? It can assess the terminology and the wording. Oh yeah, this damage has been here years. I've suddenly found it. Or alternatively, the damage wasn't there when I went on holiday. I've come back and it's suddenly here. Whereas that would be more, this looks like a valid claim, place shrinkage subsidence, especially if it's in that area, basically. So that is an invaluable aspect, and we use that for our triage. The area we're not at yet, and I think there's probably a lot being done in the market, is about fully automating the analysis, the diagnosis, and the liability aspect. So you almost get into the stage where it's almost fully automated, up to the stage where we're actually looking at mitigation, which may be tree reduction, tree removal. Big caveat there. Well, one, is it accurate? But secondly, would the customer be comfortable with that all the way through? They haven't spoke to anyone, and they're going to remove their beloved ornamental apple tree. I know for a fact that I probably wouldn't be, but that's obviously I'm probably a different age group to many of our customers now. But I think the thing to remember is what we said on the left-hand side, that we need to be comfortable that AI is the right thing to do for the whole lot. Do we still need human intervention? So I think that's a potential, but I think that's got to be looked at carefully. Would we be comfortable making that diagnosis? Would we be comfortable asking for certain mitigation without any human intervention? But it is obviously a feasible aspect going forward. Another area which we're exploring as an industry, and I know it is already taking place in motor, is a chatbot. So customers contact us and we have a query, and automatically responded without human intervention. Now, I think in motor, it's fair to say, because obviously we do some motor as well, it's fair to say that process is a lot more, a lot quicker, and also less variables as well. With subsidence, unfortunately, they can go on for some time, the claims, and also there's so many different aspects to it, so many different parties involved, etc. would that actually give a beneficial customer journey if we done a use of a chatbot in preference to a human speaking and understanding and knowing that claim and being able to outline what the stages, why we've done these stages and where we want to go, etc. So it is a possibility, but I think there'll need an awful lot of work for us to get in a good position to use chatbots. So this is a AI for our internal utilization. Now, this is a real benefit in terms of understanding the insurers and our clients' requirements. So historically, it would be a big folder with loads of printouts and seeing what each client would want us to do and how we deal with them, their claims, the philosophies, etc. It moved to a more electronic assessment, an Excel sheet with different tabs for different clients. But we now get to the stage where we use agents, so we can. It's almost like a chat GPT internally, where we say, does this client pay for tree works? Yes, they pay for up to £500 or whatever. So this is the way the world we're in now, that the internet, Google, etc. Everyone wants to know quickly, types in the question and getting the answer, rather than looking through Excel sheets, etc. and stuff like that. So this is something that the market is moved to. Also, there's so many changes with building regulations and planning, etc. It's always beneficial to use AI to get an up-to-date aspect on what is the current rules and regulations to make sure we don't overlook anything. So we're already using that in terms of utilization. An area we aren't currently using it or considering, but it could be an option, is for audits, complaint analysis, and improved exception reporting. So I mentioned about exception reporting, that we've got MI now that says this claim has been in mitigation for 9 months, whereas the average is usually 8 months, so it needs to be looked at. That's on a portfolio basis. It would be great if you could have that drilled down to the individual claim. So a pop-up comes across, this claim's now been in mitigation for 9 months. These are the options you have to move it forward, etc. Please consider, etc., or progress. So that not only does it highlight it, it also says, based on the data, the analysis, the information, where we potentially could go next. And that will be aligned to the client's philosophies, to the best practices, etc. So it greatly assists in the owners of that claim on what the options are available and how we can move that forward, basically. So I think, going back to the first slide about the changes throughout the history of subsidence, I do think that AI will have a massive impact on subsidence. But from my personal viewpoint, I hope it doesn't completely remove the human element. Not necessarily because I'll be out of job, but more so for the customer. I think there's still an element and there's still a requirement for that human intervention. But it's definitely, I think, going to improve our customer offering further by having work using AI and technology. Finished a bit earlier than I thought, but I'm pleased to say so. Based on that, I trust you've now understanding of what is subsidence, the impact of climate change on subsidence, and technology and AI in subsidence claims handling. So, all that's left to say. So, thank you, and any questions? As long as they're easy ones.
We have a question in the chat, Craig, from Charlene. It says, wondering what type of experts are appropriate for assessing the potential risk involved in subsidence, a structural engineer for buildings, as an example, maybe.
So interesting that there's the publication by the Institute of Structural Engineers by themselves, they basically don't. They state if it's particularly complex, it should be an engineer, but they actually state within that it should be somebody that is familiar with subsidence and understanding. So they're not as you would expect them to say, oh, it has to be an engineer, etc. But they actually said in their own manual that it's more important to have somebody that is familiar with subsidence and can diagnose damage, etc. So this sounds awful, but over the years we've dealt with engineers that perhaps are chartered engineers but deal with bridge design, etc. And then they tried to take on subsidence and they don't understand the principles, etc. So it doesn't always mean that you need, the qualification is critical. What I would say though, from that perspective, it's not as if we can, unfortunately, because surveying courses, etc., they very rarely do they cover subsidence. So what is the important aspect is diagnosis and understanding building pathology. When I say pathology, how do buildings move, how do cracks occur, and there is unfortunately still a lot of training when people join us. So it's not as if we can, if we have a surgery is for the next 4 or 5 years, it's not as if we can go out and get all these surveyors that have done their degree and they would be able to hit the ground running. There's a lot of training involved with that. But we have a mixture of team members, and the industry does, in terms of people that are chartered, people that aren't chartered. They've come from various backgrounds: contracting, local authorities, housing associations, estate agents. And to be frank, there's no one discipline that I would say, yes, we always need to have a chartered surveyor or chartered engineer or MCIOB. It's if they understand the building pathology and how it links in with insurance as well. That's a key criteria. It's great saying, yes, the damage is due to the tree, and then you don't take into account some misrepresentation or some insurance aspects associated with that loss. So it is having that background to technical and building, but also building on that or developing the insurance knowledge and skills.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Charlene. Do we have any others? Yeah, we've got one now from Karen. What do the innovation group do in relation to vulnerable customer training? Some customers they deal with could be vulnerable. They could be upset. It can be an emotional time for them. Removal of trees, vegetation damage, removal, etc. Good question.
No, it's a very good question, because obviously it's become a heightened aspect now, and obviously in terms of recording, and we have. I mean, it's obviously depends on the level of vulnerability, but I mean, we've had some situations where we've had customers being particularly nervous about the contractors, etc., and we've actually accompanied the customer or met them on the days they're going out there. So it's a level of it, but I think the for us, it's the being able to capture it in a diplomatic manner, and obviously capture it on our system to make sure we do deal with that customer in the appropriate manner going forward, and understand what their requirements and needs are. Obviously, we have all the training, the standard training that lots of people do, but I think it's an area that you're right. That's an aspect that the whole industry needs to be more alive to. I think in terms of that, I think we're good. We probably need to be bit more to be great. So there you go.
Thank you both. Anything else? No, I guess everyone's keen to get a lunchtime in on a Friday afternoon. So on behalf of the Insurance Institute of Manchester, Craig, thank you for taking your time to present to our members today and sharing all your knowledge and insight into this topic. You certainly didn't make it a boring lunchtime, I can assure you. Looking at the feedback in the chat, it's been very well received, so thank you. And to all our members joining today, again, thank you for taking time. We hope that you found it informative. It seems that you all enjoyed the session. Following today's call, there will be a short survey to complete. your feedback is really appreciated. It's just to ensure that we can meet expectations in the future. And also, as I said at the start, we'll be uploading the recording to the website next week. This is a new initiative that we've made available to our members, and we hope that you'll find it useful. So have a great day and enjoy the bank holiday weekend when it arrives, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good time.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, Anne.